morning, everyone. My name is Matt George. I run 7-Letter Insight, which is a public opinion and strategic messaging arm of a bipartisan public affairs firm called 7-Letter. We conducted some research to understand really what people are feeling in America. The federal poverty level certainly does measure one thing, how many people live in a household and how much it costs to feed them. But as we know, life is much messier than that, and we wanted to understand what people are really feeling, what they're thinking about, how they're interacting with their own finances and with the economy as a whole. So we conducted a survey of 2,423 adults. This was conducted at the beginning of last year, but I do have some updated data for you as well. This is to try and understand a little bit about what is driving people's decisions, what's driving their economic behaviors. There's 5 key findings that I'd like to tell you about. First one, and this is perhaps the most important thing, is that there's a segment of Americans who both feel like they are living comfortably and at the same time feel like they're struggling financially. So those seem like they're diametrically opposed. How can you possibly have those two things in your head at the same time? What we found in our survey is, and this is backed up by a bunch of our other research, focus groups, other surveys, is that you can feel like you're living comfortable. You can have the basic necessities met, but still feel like you're struggling financially because you are missing out on being able to fully interact with your community, fully interact with your life. And most importantly, plan for the future. It's not just about surviving day to day. That's not what America is about. America is about being able to plan for the future and thrive. And that's where people feel like they're struggling financially. They consider themselves middle class, this group. And they make income that is well above the federal poverty level. I'm going to show you some different breakouts for different income levels. 200 to 400% of the federal poverty level, that's solid middle class in America, who still feel like they're having to make some very difficult decisions on a day-to-day basis. As I mentioned, this unseen middle is really they're not worried as much about the day-to-day expenses, but it's that ability to look forward, plan for the future. Some of those things that they're worried about, the cost of housing, paying debt, as you just heard David talk about, and the inability, again, to really plan for the future, plan out, map what that looks like. So a true cost of economic security measure really does capture all people's ability to plan for the future, and that's what I want to show you about. You heard some anecdotal evidence of that. I want to show you the statistical representation of what people are really thinking about. So this group, this unseen middle, that qualifies as middle class and still reports having to make those difficult decisions, accounts for 24% of all Americans. This is a gigantic group of Americans that are in this group. So let's take a look at that. This question says, have you ever had to make difficult decisions, like having to choose between paying costs like housing, healthcare, childcare, monthly bills, or similar expenses? These are people who are literally having to decide whether or not to go without one necessity versus another. The red line is people who say, yes, I have to make that decision regularly or occasionally. The lighter red is people who say yes, rarely. At below 200% of the federal poverty level, that number is 60% who think that they have to do that regularly. When we look at people who are solidly middle class, the 200, 400%, we're in the range of still around 60-ish% of folks who are having to make that really difficult decision on either a daily basis or at some point within the last year as well. We ask people whether or not they're able to financially plan beyond their next paycheck. Certainly, 51% say yes, I'm able to. But when we look at the no, 40% of Americans, this is the total number of Americans, it's a representatively sampled survey, say that they are not. When we look at those who are under $50,000 a year in their household income, that number rises to nearly 6 in 10. And again, when we look at people who would qualify as middle class within the current measure of federal poverty level, you're looking at 42% of them who say that they are unable to plan beyond their next paycheck. We ask people not just whether they're able to plan, but what gives them concern, what are they stressed about? This is that data. So what we're looking at here is, from top to bottom, a list in prioritization of things that give them stress, things that they're concerned with. And if it's in red, it's above like a 50% mark. If it's in pink, it's above a 40% mark. And we can see the varying levels of degrees of stress with these different activities. You'll see the things that come up to the top are things like planning for the future, saving for the future, saving for retirement or planning for retirement. The ability to look beyond today is something that causes Americans a significant amount of stress, which is currently not being measured at all. It's not being accounted for in public policy at all, which is why, again, there's a need for an updated type of measure that goes beyond the federal poverty level, poverty measure, or the supplemental poverty level as well. This is updated data. This is something that, from a different study, again, representative sample of Americans, we are asking here about voters' priorities. By just under double, the top concern is inflation and high cost of living. Now, this has remained relatively constant since about 2021, where high cost of living, inflation surpassed healthcare as the top concern for Americans. Since then, it's been at about double the next biggest concern of anything else. So this is not just a problem from last year or the year before. This is a current problem. It's something that people are still thinking about. Last thing I'll leave you with before I turn it over to my colleague from the Urban Institute to talk about what the policy looks like to put in place to actually measure this stuff, is that there is support for it. We have 76% of Americans, and that is bipartisan. That's 2/3 of Republicans, 3/4 of Democrats who believe that we are not doing enough to support these struggling families in America. There's also bipartisan support for a true cost of living measure, or a true cost of economic security measure, as we're calling it. We can see that across the board, even with Republicans, and especially within Rust Belt, Sun Belt. We see Americans have a significant amount of support for updating the federal poverty level. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague over at the Urban Institute to come and talk a little bit about what that looks like. So thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, as we see that people want a measure of the true cost of economic security, we at the Urban Institute have developed one. I'm Greg Otch. I'm Vice President for Tax and Income Supports at Urban, and this is where I'm jointly with my colleague Len Derry and a merry band of researchers and programmers who all worked diligently to produce this work. So a true cost of economic security measure should capture all the costs families need to be economically secure and financially resilient. We want to acknowledge that costs are different for different types of families. Families with kids have different costs. Families with older members have different sets of costs. We want to capture that. And we also know that the cost of living is different depending on where you live. So our measure varies by family type and location. It's not enough just to capture the costs. We also want to look at the resources families have. And we want to build this measure in a way that's replicable and that others can do it in their spaces. So we want to build it from high quality, publicly available data. And beyond that, we based this on the best available research that we had, but it was important to ground our work in the experience of everyday Americans. And so as we developed the measure, we went out, we did some focus groups to talk to people here. Does this resonate with you? Does this make sense? Do these costs make sense? Do these struggles make sense? And so we feel pretty good about how we developed the measure. So what can we do with this measure? Well, one, we can see how many people are struggling economically. We can see how it varies for different types of families in different places. We can assess why people are struggling. What are the costs that people are having the biggest challenges with? Does it vary from place to place? Does it vary from family to family? And ultimately, we hope that this will help identify federal, state, and local policies and practices that can empower families and help them meet true cost of economic security. So our top level findings, they've been alluded to already. 52% of people in the US are economically insecure and not poised to thrive. Now 9% total are within 10% of the cost of economic security. In other words, they are meeting their bills, they're paying rent, they're buying food. What they can't do is save for an emergency, save for their kids' education, save for the future. The most vulnerable group are kids. 61% of children are in families with resources that fall below the true cost of economic security threshold. And that's a higher proportion than we see for working age adults and older adults. And across the country, people are most vulnerable in the non-Metro West region. 59% of folks in that region do not have the resources to meet the cost of economic security. People are best off in the Metro West, but still there. 45% of people in the Metro Midwest have resources falling below the level they need to be economically secure. So let me tell you how we developed the measure and tell you what it shows. I'm going to talk about how we captured costs, how we captured resources, look at how the rates of economic insecurity vary for people in different circumstances. And I want to stress that we developed this measure for 2022. We don't have a trend, we don't know whether things are getting worse or better, and of course we're hoping to replicate the measure to see how things are evolving as we move forward through time. Now, we are not alone in developing measures of economic security. There are many people who have living wage calculators, self-sufficiency standards, and we looked at all these measures and looked at what costs they were capturing, what thresholds they were setting, and sort of picked the best of, did some innovation to develop our unique measures. So let me start talking about the costs. Most important cost, everyone has to pay for housing. We have housing costs. We use HUD data on fair market rents to see what it would cost to pay for adequate housing that's not crowded, where kids have their own bedrooms. For food, we set our threshold from the USDA's low-cost food plan. Our official poverty measure is based on the Thrifty Food Plan. This is a step up from that. We figure everyone needs health insurance, and so we said the cost of healthcare that you need to buy is based on what is available in your Obamacare ACA marketplace, and we set it at the second lowest silver plan. We also accounted for out-of-pocket costs. We looked at childcare costs for families with children, transportation costs that capture both the cost of purchasing and maintaining a car, as well as public transportation costs. Technology, today everyone needs broadband, everyone needs a cell phone, we incorporate those costs. We have a tax calculator, so we look at what payroll, federal and state taxes people owe. Debt is important. A lot of families have regular debt payments. We couldn't capture all forms of debt, but we did focus on student debt. So we have a sense of across the country how many people have student debt and what they need to pay to service that debt every year. A whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff. You need clothes, you need cleaning supplies. It's important to have some money to be publicly engaged, buy books, things like that. So we account for miscellaneous costs. And then finally, you need to build up precautionary savings. You need to save for retirement. And so we set a savings target at 10% of all your other costs. So whatever your costs are, you need 10% more. That means that if you can do that for 5 straight years, you have 6 months of expenses paid for. Once you've got that, what people suggest that you have 6 months paid for, then you can save for your kids' education, your own retirement. On the resource side, our data for families and for the resources come mostly from the American Community Survey, with some adjustments with our some modeling we do at the Urban Institute with our ADIS microsimulation model. So what are the resources we capture? Well, your earnings, your self-employment income, interest, dividends, and rent, pension income and distributions from your retirement accounts, cash transfers from social insurance programs, and we're able to, those tend to be underreported in survey data, and we're able to adjust for that underreporting. The cash value of in-kind public supports like SNAP and WIC, again, those also tend to be underreported, and we can adjust for that underreporting. The child support you receive, tax credits, we put tax credits on the resource side of the ledger. Right? And those are things like the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. If you have employer-sponsored insurance or government-provided insurance through Medicaid, Medicare, we count that as a resource, and we set that resource level as exactly equal to the costs you would have. So we don't sort of get into how much, how good, is this too good, too cheap? It's if you have insurance, it covers the cost. And then some families have multiple adults where an adult stays at home to take care of the child. We wanted to count that as a resource to families. So if you have an extra adult in the family who's engaged in home work, taking care of their kid, we offset your child care costs. So if you have a kid, you have a child care cost. If you have an adult who can provide that care, we put that on the resource side of the ledger. So let's, after all that introduction, let's look at the costs we have. So this is for families with children, and all the adults are under age 65. And these are median costs by category, and then median overall. So don't quite add up, but they're all medians. For rent, for housing costs, about $18,000 a year is the cost you need to cover your housing for people in these families. Health care costs, so both the cost of insurance and your out-of-pocket costs are $20,000 a year. Your food costs are almost $13,000 a year. Transportation's over $15,000. Childcare costs are over $11,000. Your savings targets, we expect you should be able to save about $12,000 a year. You have a tax bill of around, but not tax bill of about $16,000. All the other things that I didn't explicitly talk about, transportation, clothes, etc., that all adds up to almost $19,000. When you add it all up, and remember we're talking about costs that people don't necessarily see they have, like their total tax, their tax before credit, their health insurance costs, which they might not see. When you add it all up, for a family with kids, the true cost of economic security is about $135,000 a year. Let's look at the resources. The typical resources, and again, we're adding things into resources like the value of employer-sponsored health insurance. Those resources are about $121,000. Resources, on average, fall below the cost. And so it's not surprising that for families with children and all adults under age 65, working age adults, the share who cannot meet the true cost of economic security is 58%. Let's look at a couple of different types of families. Let's look at working age adults without kids. All the costs are lower. No child care costs, lower rent costs, lower health insurance costs. When you add it all up, their true cost of economic security is about $89,000 a year. Their resources are a little over $92,000 a year. And so on average, working age adults without children, 46% are economically insecure. Let's look at families with older adults. These are families where there are people who are over age 65. Rent costs are not that different from working age adults. Healthcare costs are much higher, so not surprising. When you add it all up, the true cost of economic security for adults over age 65 is $105,000. Their resources are about $109,000. Where are the resources coming from? Social Security and Medicare. And so the share of older adults who are economically insecure is 48%. We want to focus on some special types of families. We'll look at three-generation families. So you got a grandparent, a working age adult, and a kid in these families. And you can see that overall their costs are higher than families with children, about $170,000 when you add it all up. Their rental costs are higher, their health insurance costs are higher. but the resources are also higher because that 65-year-old adult generally brings resources in terms of Social Security and Medicare. On net, costs are slightly higher than resources, and so we find that 56% of people in three-generation households do not have all the resources they need to meet their true cost of economic security. We talked about student debt. We wanted to look at families that have student debt. So we looked at families with kids that have student debt, and we see that the average annual payment that people have to make towards student debt is $2,000. That's not what they owe, that's what they're paying every year. Overall, these families, their costs, when you add them all up, on average is about $144,000 a year, so higher than the typical family with kids, only slightly. And again, they're carrying debt. The resources, however, are also higher at about $144,000 a year. So the rate of economic insecurity for families with student debt is about 48%. What does that mean? Well, some people get debt, and it means they get a certificate, they get a degree, and they're able to get a better job. So yes, there's cost to student debt, and there are people who aren't working in the type of jobs they would want, but when you get student debt, many people also get the degree and the credential that helps them improve their material resources. Let's look across the country. Comparing metro areas to non-metro areas, we see that the cost of metro areas are higher than in non-metro areas. Not particularly surprising, particularly rental costs are higher. But the people who live in metro areas tend to have better jobs, earn more. So resources are somewhat higher in metro areas than non-metro areas. And so on that, there's not that much difference in the rate of economic security between metro and non-metro. Looking across the country, we see that costs are higher on the Northeast and the West. Resources are also tend to be higher in the Northeast and the West. Costs are lower in the South, but so are resources in the South. Costs and resources are more in line in places like the Northeast and in the Midwest. So in general, you see that the rate of economic security is the lowest in the Midwest, 47%, still pretty high, and highest in the West, where it's 57%. So let's look at economic insecurity rates for different demographic groups. Again, children are the most vulnerable. 61% of children live in families whose resources fall below the rate of economic security. For prime age or age adults and for older adults, it's just under half. Looking across racial and ethnic groups, we see higher rates of economic insecurity for Hispanic people and Black people than Asian and Pacific Islanders and white people. And a lot of that reflects historic discrepancies in where people can live, their educational opportunities, their work opportunities. So finally, what we wanted to do is look at, what distinguishes places where people live, where lots of people are thriving, where the rate of economic security is low, and where lots of people are struggling. What are the cost differences? What do you see? And we see, so we looked at the 100 largest counties. We looked at the 5 counties with the highest rates of economic insecurity and the 5 counties with the lowest rates of economic insecurity. You can see there's quite a difference, 71% versus 32%. In the places where a lot of people are struggling, housing costs are a little higher, healthcare costs are a little higher, transportation costs are a little lower. On net, the cost differences are not huge. What is really driving the difference in struggles is resources. In places where people are thriving, average resources are over $170,000 a year. In places where people are struggling, resources about $100,000 a year. So it's not people aren't struggling with costs. Costs are high everywhere. Bringing costs down will help people, but you can't forget the fundamentals of the economy, what people earn. What do we need to do to help people earn more, keep more So things to keep in mind, our measure is for 2022. We can't talk about trends. Opinions can reasonably vary about the thresholds. You know, is this the right amount of cost for housing? Is this the right amount of cost? We think we got it about right, but we also feel we provided enough information that people can recreate the measure on their own or slide things up and down like our savings targets. It's hard to fully capture all costs and all resources. For example, the only debt we have in our model right now is student debt. We know medical debt is important. These are costs that we would like to capture. We know that pension income tends to be underreported. We know that some people own their houses and have very low or no mortgages, and that should be a resource. So, you know, there are things we can do better, and these are things we're hoping to do better in the future. Key takeaways, things to keep in mind: half of all people are economically insecure based on our true cost of economic security measure. Families with children are particularly vulnerable, and places with higher proportions of people who are struggling don't have particularly high cost. They really have people who are struggling to earn money, struggling on the resource side. So it's going to be important to help everyone to bring costs down, especially high cost items like housing and healthcare. But we also have to not take our eye off the idea that we have to help families increase their resources. That's going to be crucial to make improving economic security for folks living in this country. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, David. And of course, thank you, Representative Moore. And thank you to all of you who've come to learn about the True Cost of Economic Security and about the National True Cost of Living Coalition. Key takeaways, things that I want you to walk away with. An appreciation that for the first time we have a measure that is based in economic security, not just poverty. And what it does though, when based in economic security, is it doesn't leave those who are classified as poor behind. It looks at what it takes for America to make sure that everybody can thrive. I want you to appreciate that this data is data that has been scrubbed time and time again, and it comes from the sources that many of us use on a daily basis when we're looking at the experience as Americans. And appreciate that it is county by county. So we're not just lumping everybody into one national measure. We're not just saying that, like the official poverty measure, that a family of four living anywhere in America needs just $32,000, or $32,180 to survive. We're saying it looks different county by county, state by state. So it gives us the data, the material, the information needed to go in and to make decisions as policymakers and influencers at the county level, at the state level, and then for the nation on the whole. And so I hope that you all will lean into this data, this tool. You can learn more about the tool by going to the Urban Institute's website, also by going to the National True Cost of Living Coalition.org website. And there you'll find out what we're doing, who's involved, who's engaged. The next steps are to keep populating this measure with data that lets us know what the trend is. I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to be surprised if we don't see a significant drop in those who are economically insecure, because the work has to be done to make sure that the policies meet people where they are. So again, thank all of you, a big thanks to all of you for coming, and please continue to lean in. And again, thank you, Representative Moore.
Go to website, is all this available?
All of this is available, nationaltruecostofliving.org. Did I say that right?
Yes,
Okay.
sure did.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please.
Maybe Dr. Gregg, one of the things that has occurred to me during your presentation is the debate and conversation that we're always having about productivity. Is there anything in here that indicates that, if people just worked more or they're not productive enough, that would help them have more resources? We are led down this primrose path, particularly at the lower end of the income spectrum. If they would just get up off their lazy asses, come out of the basement playing video games, that we would not see these distortions. So we didn't measure productivity, right?
No, we did not. But we can certainly look at families in which there is a full-time worker
Yeah.
and what the rates of economic security are based on having a full-time, full-year worker for those families versus other families.
So this model does show us some families that have two adults in it working. And still, we have these discrepancies, even when there are two people working.
And
I mean, is that fair to
yes,
say?
and
It captures-
income,
Yes,
so that you can look at that and see what the level of resources are, you know, percentage of resources that are attributed to income, and then all of the other costs, the other resources.
so we look at market income versus all other income, and then we have social security and Medicare usually either way, because they're earning benefits, so they can be part of market or non-market.
And I will just add that it does, speak to the point that you made about wages and wage stagnation, and it helps us to appreciate and understand that a little more.
All right, this is awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Because everybody in here is expert.
Keep going. Thank you.